helping people turn their rent into equity, and then their equity into investments, and their investments into retirement. So you can do all of that through real estate.
There's nothing I hate to see more than someone wasting their money paying someone else's mortgage.
So if you know that you're in a hot location and you're like, okay, this area has a really good school district, it's going to go really quickly. Let's make sure we price it accurately so we can get you guys onto the next journey. As a buyer, if you're going to go buy a piece of farm or ranch property, you might want to know who's going to be your neighbor. They're not making any more land in Texas. And with all the development that's coming in, it's crucial that as us agents be local experts in our market to know, hey, this is what's coming in.
A lot of people assume because they can walk into the subdivision that they might not need a realtor with them. You always need to be represented. You wouldn't go to court without a lawyer.
You have to have a good buyer's agent that's willing to go to bat for you.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Because you're not going to get any perks if you don't know the lingo to ask.
Exactly.
You're not just shopping for that agent. Like you want to know that agent has a solid team built
That's a
out
good
as well.
point. He is going to go in there and rip that house apart,
Right.
and that's what you want him to do.
With over 3 million real estate agents in the U.S., 150,000 in Texas, and 9,300 in the DFW area alone, how do you go about finding the right real estate agent in your area? How important is it to find the right real estate agent to buy or sell your home? We uncover this and so much more in this first episode of Inside Texas Real Estate. We hope you enjoy. So welcome everybody to our first episode of our podcast, Inside Texas Real Estate. So I'm Craig, joined with Tammy and Chance. And I think it makes sense just to start out by talking about what this podcast is going to be about, with it being our first episode. So from my perspective, if you're a home buyer or a home seller, what we want to dive into during this podcast is really what the Texas real estate market looks like. So if you're a home buyer, I'm really excited about getting some of the different, touch points on a transaction on this podcast. So if you think about, the appraisers that you're going to talk to, the home inspectors, the title companies, I want to get those sort of voices on this podcast so that we can sort of, uncover the home buying process, right, for at least the first time home buyers. So I'm excited about that. And then certainly if you're a home seller, you kind of want to know what the Texas real estate market is like, right? So I can't wait to sort of cover that on this podcast too. So do you guys have anything you want to add to that, or like what you want this podcast to be?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
I think it's important to just provide the information, the answers the best that we can, because whoever's looking for us is looking for that. So,
yeah, cool.
Exactly.
Awesome. So do you want to start by introducing ourselves?
Sure, you go first.
Okay. So, my name's Craig. I owned Cultivate Home Mortgage with my wife, Kim. And we basically have a motto that we want to help our clients plant their roots, hence the Cultivate name. But also I've been sort of putting together, what I want 2025 and the years forward to look like. And I'm really passionate about helping people turn their rent into equity, and then their equity into investments, and their investments into retirement. So you can do all of that through real estate. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited to, get more into that on probably a future episode. But I own Cultivate Home Mortgage located here in Denton, and I'm Craig, and Kim will be on future podcasts as well. So
I'm Texas Tammy, realtor with Texas T Realty Team and Century 21. Let's see. I do residential, farm and ranch land, commercial land. My mission is to help families build wealth through real estate. That's my big passion of mine. Because yes, you're absolutely right. Generational wealth, it's always made through real estate. Mm-hmm. And my thing is anything that I learn, because I do get the blessing to rub elbows with some higher up people, that whatever I learn from them, that I can share that on to other people as well. Just be boots on the ground. What's happening in Texas, behind the scenes. This is real, y'all.
Yeah.
I'm Chance Gibbs. My wife and I are the Gibbs Property Group at Keller Williams, Dallas Preston Road. We run a team. My mom is on our team. She's a showing agent for me in Wichita Falls. And then we have an agent named Vanessa Smeltz, who is also on our team. My passion in real estate, I think, really is the first-time home buyer. primarily, because there's nothing I hate to see more than someone wasting their money paying someone else's mortgage and renting. And in the market we've seen the last year, I think home ownership, while the rates were higher, it was a little bit more attainable because the sellers were so willing to play ball and give seller concessions to pay for some of the closing costs, and then the down payment assistance grants they were able to get. I was able to help a lot of first-time buyers get into houses, and I think that's my favorite thing to see. So
Cool. So those sorts of things, they vary if we're in a buyer or a seller's market, right? Like,
Right.
if we're in a seller's market, it's a little bit more difficult to get seller credits for a house, but if we're in a buyer's market right now, it's a little bit easier to get seller credits, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
We're picking between your house or the next. Who wants to play?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everything is always negotiable. At least right now, it's all negotiable.
It is.
So as long as, you just ask. Like, that's the
Mm-hmm.
thing. If you, for my clients, I'm like, well, let's ask. All the worst they can
That's
say
all we
is,
can do.
The worst I can say is no.
Well, and with inflation skyrocketing and incomes not raising, it's hard for especially a young couple to save up what it costs to move into a house. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
it's almost, the average age of first time homebuyer now is 38.
Yeah.
That is, I have a friend I graduated high school with who has a grandchild and she's 38. That is, you think first time buyer, you think 22.
Right.
You don't think 38.
Yeah.
But that's the reality because of the current economic times. So I like it whenever you can get the down payment assistance and the seller concessions, and it's actually affordable to move in.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what got you guys into real estate, being an agent? Like, what was that? What was that
You go
transition?
first.
Was that?
I always wanted to be an agent, but I was afraid to take the leap because you don't know when your next paycheck is coming. And then my wife and I got married in 2020, and I was able to start the real estate journey for both of us because there were steady incomes. Because and I'm sure any business owner can tell you, it's very nerve-wracking whenever you finally just jump off the cliff and it's just you there to support you, no paycheck to rely on, steady every other week. So that's when I was able to do it, and I finally realized all my friends were asking me for real estate advice, and we're always looking at houses on various online apps. And I thought, wait a minute, I can go and look at these in person and sell them. So that's really what got me in.
Cool.
Yeah, so before I did real estate, I used to sell drugs legally. I was a pharmaceutical sales rep, and I was working for the startup company and helping them from the ground up. And the CEO was like, "You've got a fire in your belly. Like, you should be some type of entrepreneur." And I was like, maybe I should, Sarah. Maybe I should. And then I started getting into real estate. I actually was getting into wholesaling. And I was like, let me pause because there's a lot of legal things and documents. And I was like, I really don't know what I'm doing. And I feel like I'm going to get myself in trouble and sued. So instead of doing that, I was like, well, let me just go get my real estate license. And of course, me wanting to be like an entrepreneur and your own business owner, might as well go do that. And real estate it's definitely relational. Every business owner is different, but at least for me, and it sounds like for Chance as well, is more relational than transactional. Put your
Absolutely.
people first. Put your people first. The money will always come later.
Yep.
But,
Right.
yeah, as a business owner, I will definitely agree. It's, you don't get that. You don't know where your next paycheck's going to come from. So the hustle is hard.
Real, right? For
Yeah,
sure.
it is very real.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up the story about being a drug dealer because, like, I'm super into coffee. Like, I roast my own coffee here, so like occasionally I'll roast some for somebody else, and I feel like I'm a drug dealer, like giving them.
You're making something in your
coffee.
kitchen.
Yeah.
Did you freebase it
Exactly.
in the bathtub, Craig? Is that where you're roasting him?
Right.
He's like, it's $10 a pound. You want mild or dark?
But yeah, so what got Kim and I into this is on the lending side is that we've always been interested in investing. Like we're investors. We have a couple of houses out of state, and we've just always been interested in, I guess, like the number side of what goes into a mortgage, what goes into the real estate transaction. So Kim is the one that got me into it. She was actually into it before I was. But we both took the leap August of 22 and started our own company. So that's kind of what led us into getting into the lending side of things. So cool.
Yeah.
We'll have to ask Kim to share her story
Yes.
into that when she does.
I'm sure it's different from mine, right?
No, it isn't. She just has her, her at home mom story.
Yeah.
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 And I
for
like
sure.
that story.
Yeah. So cool. So the topic that we wanted to discuss today was like really how to find a good real estate agent. And I think that you guys have sort of some stats or some numbers on what agents did in 2024. And I kind of want to talk about that because I think that in today's world, I think everybody at least knows a real estate agent, right?
Yeah.
But how do you find one that's great? How do you find one that's active in the market? How do you know that they're knowledgeable with what they're doing? Because all of those things are super important when it comes to buying or selling a house. So I guess we can kind of start there. Like how do people end up finding great real estate agents in their area?
Well, I think what I would say is first and foremost, look at your close family members and your close friends and see if any of those people are a realtor. Because I do believe you should kind of support your tribe. There's nothing worse than when your friend uses someone else. Oh, I didn't know that you could sell a house in, Louisville. I'm like, well, I'm in Denton. It's right there. But
Yeah.
I think you should always, look in your friends and family. And if they can help you, maybe that's great. But if you're going out to a market that you're not familiar with, or you don't know any, that you're unfamiliar with, then, a quick Facebook, Google search can tell you kind of who's active, I think. Because you either want an expert in the market if you're going to buy there, someone who knows the schools and the local places and restaurants, and maybe someone who's branded themselves to that town. I think if you're going to look for someone you don't know, and I would at least interview 3. If you're going to look for people again that you have never met in your life, I would interview a couple, at least 2, maybe 3, to see how you jive with them and get along, because they're helping you make probably the biggest purchase you're ever going to.
Yeah.
And it's important because you meet buyers or sellers that said our last agent was horrible, and it's like, God, hope no one ever says that about us.
I know. I think of that too. I'm like, ooh.
But that's just what I think, because that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, absolutely. I think referral, the word of mouth, is just, it's priceless, right? Because if someone is referring you, so if you're going to your friends or family or someone that they've used before, the power of referral is just magical, because they know, hey, we've used Texas Tammy or we've used Chance and they were awesome, so use those guys again. And for sure you want to make sure, just because someone, and I've seen agents that have had their license for many, many years, but they only did 10 transactions in 20 years, right? So just because you've had a license for a long time doesn't mean that they're continually active and they're up to date. So when you are checking, and if you're in a completely new area, I would say for a buyer is, yes, checking their Facebooks, checking to see, how active are they social media wise. At open houses, I know a lot of people will meet agents at open houses, but for me, it's all about bringing value first. And one of my core values is education. So if they're able to provide, if you're at an open house and again, this is, you don't know any other agents, go to them and just start asking questions, start interviewing those agents at the open house. And that's what you're there. Ask and see. That's a great way to interview.
And that's a good point, because if you're going to a market that you don't know another agent in, the agents that are hosting the open houses are either going to be the listing agent who's going to know the neighborhood well, or it's going to be a hungry agent looking for some buyers to represent. And the fact that they're willing to host open houses speaks volumes for them, because they are hustling and trying, and so many agents don't do that.
Yeah.
So that was a good point to bring up about the open house.
Yeah.
What do you guys think as far as the importance of your real estate agent, like knowing the area that you want to buy in, because I think that's important too, right? Like, how important is it, to know that your real estate agent truly knows, the areas that you want to purchase in?
Yeah, geographical competency is a very big one. One, because if you're buying, or even if it's really selling, your comps, right? So if you know that you're in a hot location and you're like, okay, this area has a really good school district, it's going to go really quickly. Let's make sure we price it accurately so we can get you guys on to the next journey. For instance, for me, like in Pilot Point, I'll probably talk about Pilot Point a lot, but in Pilot Point, I'm very involved in my community. On the chamber board of director, I'm also on the planning and zoning commission board, and that helps me. It not only gives me value, but to help the other people, because all these new developments are coming in, and as a buyer, if you're going to go buy a piece of farm or ranch property, you might want to know who's going to be your neighbor, and if you get an agent that's not from that area or from Dallas or Irving, and they're saying they're representing in Pilot Point, the likelihood of them knowing, like, oh, who's going to be building or what's coming up around them is, significant versus someone who's local.
Yeah, like, you bought your dream farmhouse, and then 1 year later, you've got a subdivision across in your view.
Yeah, and then you're going to be like this realtor. And you're like, ugh.
Yeah, we hated our last realtor. It's like, oh, probably a nice person. You just
Yeah. And so I think that at least for me, what I see kind of, because there's so much, they're not making any more land in Texas. And with all the development that's coming in, it's crucial that as us agents be local experts in our market to know, hey, this is what's coming in. Do you know that? Because that's going to increase your value in the lot. Or it could decrease, right? Like, say if you've got something that's not as desirable moving in next door.
And if they're looking for, especially in areas like Pilot Point, kind of the fringe communities of DFW where there is a lot of the new development, we get the emails all the time from the home builders, the D.R. Hortons, the History Makers, the Bloomfields. The agents know more about the perks being offered to the buyers. So if we get a buyer that has a price range and they want a new build, versus them just visiting the community unrepresented, and the community is obviously going to highlight themselves. If you have an agent that can visit multiple communities with you and go over the perks and the kickbacks, not kickbacks, but perks and everything that the builders are offering, I think it's important too. That's one of the things. It's so important to have an agent that knows those communities.
Oh my gosh, yes, especially because in the new developments, people don't talk about the PIDs, which is a public improvement district, MUDs, municipal utility district. Now there's TRIZ, which is tax rate increment. It's another special tax.
Another acronym.
And PIDs, there's PUDs, there's SUDs, there's MUDs.
Yep.
And so with all this new community, especially for a new home buyer, like if you're going into that community, I would make sure you have an agent that knows the area and is going to ask those questions, because affordability, that's going to eat up into your mortgage payment. Property taxes are going to eat into it. And then if you've got these extra costs and HOA. So yeah, when I get a new first-time home buyer and whatever their budget is, the first thing I'm doing, if they do want a new
build.
Yeah, I'm calling all my sales reps and like,
oh, yeah.
What do you guys got? What's going on? Woohoo,
Yeah, and your agent can a lot of times get other things thrown in for you.
Oh, yeah.
Appliance suites, covered costs for this and that. And a lot of people assume because they can walk into the subdivision that they might not need a realtor with them, but you always need to be represented. You wouldn't go to court without a lawyer.
Yeah.
Unless you were braver than me. So you shouldn't go anywhere without a realtor.
Yeah, and a lot of those builders, they made their contract to represent them,
to
protect them. It's not to represent or to protect the client coming in, but yes, going in with them for sure and knowing what's going on. One of the things that I was able to get in a contract, which I was like, let's see if they can do this. It was my clients were renting and they still had 2 months of rent left. And I was like, well, we'll sign this right now if you guys will pay for the other 2 months. And the builder was like, sure. So
yeah.
Like, done.
And so many people don't understand how the builders work. Like, they we'll probably cover this on a podcast, but long and the short of it is they take out a massive loan, buy the land, build the houses. They pay on one loan, and then usually they're their lender for the little piece of that massive land that you bought. So they need to pay that big loan off quickly, but they have so much more freedom for what they can do with that house because they built it, and they're controlling, the money with it than your average house on the street. And I think you can sometimes get a lot more depending on how motivated they are to sell.
Yes, it's motivated, but also like you have to have a good buyer's agent that's willing to go to bat for you.
Oh yeah,
right. Like,
because you're not going to get any perks if you don't know
Yeah.
the lingo to ask.
Exactly. Or like with my first time home buyers, because that's kind of what we're talking about. Like when I'm talking to them in a buyer's consultation, I'm like, okay, what's your timeline? What's going on? So I try to figure out like what can we start asking for if we do go the builder route. Now, what can we ask that they can give us to kind of help them? Because it is so difficult to get into
It is.
a house for your first time, just to get your foot in the door.
It is hard.
So I think having a good buyer's agent that knows how to help you get in.
Right.
Right.
And not afraid to ask the tough questions too, or negotiate with the other realtors.
Yes, and I will say, because we got wonderful Craig here.
Yeah.
Not just realtors, but loan officers.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, so I always tell my clients, realtors, loan officers, left and right hand, they come together to make the transaction
Right.
happen.
Yeah.
And just as much as you need a good realtor, you need a really good loan officer
Yes.
who's going to be able to be like, let's get you this type of program.
And it is so important to have someone who you or your agent can message after hours, because I always say real estate takes place in the evening, because everyone looks at houses at night. We write offers at night. We do a lot during the day, but so much of this job is after 5, because that's when your buyers are off work. And I've used Craig, used several other lenders throughout my career, and the local ones are the ones that will respond at 10 o'clock if you're in a bind.
Yeah.
And if you use a big bank, they don't. You are on their time because you are just one in a sea of them. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
you're right. You need your local lender and your local agent, really,
Yeah.
to have
Go
the
back.
smoothest process.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, because when you're looking for a real estate agent to buy a house or even sell your house, you're not just working with that real estate agent. A lot of times, you're working with that real estate agent's team as well. So you're talking about lenders. That real estate agent might have a home inspector that they'd refer you to and stuff like that. So it's not just you're not just shopping for that agent. Like you want to know that agent has a solid team built
That's a
out
good
as well.
point. And I'm sure we'll talk about home inspections, but you
Yeah.
said it. I use a guy named Ken here in Denton. I tell my buyers he is going to go in there and rip that house apart,
Right.
and that's what you want him to do.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's going to call you in and tell you everything that's wrong with it. And he's going to tell you, this isn't something you have to worry about, but, or get this fixed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, don't have a heart attack. That's what you're paying him for.
Exactly. Yeah. Well,
You want him to tear it apart.
Yes. Yes. Well,
Almost to the point of backing out.
Yes, you're like, well, I always say no house is perfect because
Nope.
it's made by humans, and no human is perfect. So you want a very detailed inspector. I use Kevin, very detailed, very thorough. And you're like, dang, Kevin, I didn't know you were going to find all that, but
Right.
it's good. Like that's why you're paying them, to find everything wrong with the home.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And keep in mind, since the podcast is about how to find, a realtor, your realtor that you interview asks these questions. Do you have an arsenal of recommendations for a lender if you need one, for an inspector? Because any good realtor is going to have those relationships created and cultivated already.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Plumbers, electricians,
Plumbers,
GCs,
even local contractors,
Yeah.
because it's especially out here in DFW. There's
Roofers.
so many roofers and contractors, and so many bad ones.
yeah.
And your realtor is going to be the one with the pulse on those companies and can give you. Your relationship's not going to end with your realtor after you move into your house, because stuff always comes up with your house. So when you need something painted or new floors, you need to be able to reach out to your realtor, and they need to provide you with their recommendations that they know that you can trust because they've seen their work or they've worked with them in the past.
Yeah.
'Cause you can go to Angie's List or Craigslist, but who knows?
Yeah. Well, that goes back to just the power of the referral, right?
Yep.
Word of mouth.
Exactly.
And knowing who you've worked with, or, sometimes you do try a new person and you're like, okay, you guys want to try them? That's cool. And then you're like, never again.
Never again.
So, if that happens, because it's life, but yes, we definitely, I think a good realtor too, like Chance was saying, is that they are with you. It's not just closing and then you're done. It's you've got a relationship that's going to be there the whole time. Who do you need? We got you. Or what's coming into town?
Right.
Or this is happening, or whatnot.
Yeah.
So
And there's so many changes now that, especially this last year, keeping agents like us, like high producing agents, transactionally, maybe even numbers you can look at too, but if you look at transactions, what I'm talking about, we both did over 20 last year. So we are well versed in every new document that comes out from Trek.
yes.
And an agent who maybe writes one deal a year maybe has no idea.
Right.
Maybe they do. They could be an expert. But I've found that practice makes perfect.
Well, it's a numbers thing, right?
Yep.
So the more transactions you do, the more you get equipped with it, the more you're able to go to bat. Your negotiation skills get better every time. You get more vendors every time, so it just keeps growing and growing and growing. It's just a cycle.
Right.
Yeah.
I kind of liken that to, the question of, would you go see a doctor or would you go see a surgeon if you only knew they did it one time a year or two times a year? You wouldn't
Yeah.
do it.
That.
Yeah.
You want somebody who's regularly practiced in it to have the confidence that they're going to do the job that they need to do.
It's funny you said that because my mom, not to share her medical history, but she needed back surgery. And I told her, do you want a doctor who does 2 a week in Wichita Falls or 2 a day in Dallas? Mm-hmm. She came to Dallas to the Back Institute.
Yeah.
She was walking that day.
Yeah. Well, experience matters. It definitely does. And, with all these so many changes have going on the real estate side with our contracts and the verbiage and agreements and stuff like that, and having someone who knows it, and also because you also deal with other agents, right? You don't want to be that one agent where you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to be with them. Like, oh, here's the storm. Here's the storm coming.
Yeah.
But I think if you're collaborative, because you've got to be collaborative, you got to be a really good negotiator. You're always putting your clients. We have fiduciary duties to our clients, and if you're always putting them first,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, cool. Real quick, can we talk about the buyer's agent agreement? Because I think that, and this is more for the first-time home buyers, right? I think that there's a lot of trepidation out there as far as like what they need to sign, when they sign it, how long the time frame is, and all of that stuff. So can we sort of like, I guess, dispel that myth?
Before we say that, everything is negotiable. I just want to say
Yeah.
that right now
Yeah.
as a disclosure.
Yeah, 'cause
Everything is.
And that all came around because of people putting the commission on the MLS, and the buyer's agent commission and the seller's agent commission is always negotiable. You can list your house for sale by yourself without an agent. You can hire an agent. You can pay them whatever percentage you want to. Traditionally, it's been 3% for seller, 3% for buyer. I would usually do 6, 3, and 3, but I've reduced on the sell side. I've reduced on the buy side, whatever it takes to help the client. The buyer rep agreement, it is a predetermined percentage. You can put in there. You can put whatever number you want. You can put 0. You can put 3. You can put 10. Mm-hmm. You can also change the date. It can be a 1-day agreement. It can be a 1-address agreement. It's a little annoying. Yeah, you want to see this house, you need to sign this legally, but it is what it is. But I think people thought they were immediately signing their life away,
right,
and they were going to have to fork up payment no matter what. And I would never sign a 6-month agreement with an agent that I'd never met.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't. Yeah. So I usually talk to them on the phone, explain it, educate, and then I haven't had anyone push back.
And again, it all comes down to a really good agent,
Yes.
right? Because a really
Exactly.
good agent is
Right.
going to hold their hand, explain, and say, you know. And I do the same thing. I do trials. You know, it's kind of like dating,
Yeah.
right? I'm like, we're going into a married relationship. I don't even know you, you know,
Yeah.
on paper or whatever. And I'm like, well, let's try it out. I get to kind of know about you. You get to kind of know about me, see how I work, and then we go from there. And yes, but you can do it per address. You can do it just city or county, and you know,
And you can put whatever number in there you want.
and it's negotiable.
Yeah.
I've had some. So I was working an open house not that long ago, and I had a family come in, and they're like, "Well, we don't want to sign anything, so we do open house." They go to open houses until they, you know, find their property. And I said, "Okay." And then I said, "Well, can I ask you, like, why don't you want to sign an agreement?" Well, I'm just curious from a buyer's perspective. And they were like, "Well, a lot of them are like a year or 6 months." And I was like, "Well, have you ever asked them just to do a week?" And they were like, "I didn't know we could do that." And I was like, "Well, yeah."
Yeah.
I was like, "What?"
I actually sold a house to buyers that I was the second call
Yeah.
because the first agent wanted them to sign a 6-month agreement
Yeah.
before she'd even met them.
Yeah.
So I just said, well, let's meet first, and
Yeah.
then I'll review all this. And,
Yeah.
you know, I think the agreement ended up being 2 months. But they were fine. They were just scared because they thought they were getting in a contract they weren't going to be able to.
Yeah. And again, it comes down to that an experienced buyer's agent that says, "Okay, let me explain it to you," and everything is negotiable. And there are times when if they sign it and we have agreed at whatever percent, and then we go under contract and whatever happens, and it happens to change, then it happens to change, and then we just do paperwork to make sure it changes to reflect that, because there is no real estate transaction is the same. Every single one is different.
Right.
And every situation is different. So depending on what's going on, you know, again, that's why everything is negotiable.
Yeah.
And having somebody.
Yeah.
And people were so afraid of that agreement. Agents were freaking out over that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, just read it and explain it and move on.
Honestly, I was really happy. I don't know about you. I was
I
excited.
didn't mind it.
Yeah, I was excited. And the reason I was excited is because, number one, it was going to weed out those agents that were too scared. Like, they didn't, you know, they were feared. They're like, "I don't know if I can do this." And I was like, well,
Right.
if y'all can't explain this, I don't know if y'all can go on after that.
Right.
But I was, and then number two is that because it's showing our dedication to that buyer, hey, I know you're serious, and I'm telling you I'm going to be serious in representing you as well. Because there is so many agents out there. Let me give you the opportunity to show you how I, as Texas Tammy, works. And I go
Right.
out there and hustle and try to find whatever deals, because everyone is different. Now, I do get to, there's different personalities out there for everybody. I know I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea, cup of whiskey, but it's good to have those, because it's, again, this business is a relational business.
Right.
And I think if you're always putting value over relationships over transactions, you'll go everywhere.
You will.
You'll go places.
Yeah. One of the things that I saw, I mean, this was probably more so when that form first came out, is that a lot of people stopped going to open houses because they thought that they needed to sign something to see the open house. So is that,
And that was all coming from agents having meltdowns online and not understanding that form.
yeah.
So I always think if you are ignorant on a piece of knowledge, you shouldn't speak on it. But everyone online was freaking out over that, and I think that just snowballed. And it's like 2 pages. It's not even hard to read.
Well, I
Yeah.
think too, it's anything online, right?
Yeah.
Like you have people that I see all the time, clickbait videos. Oh, you put
Right.
0% down and get land, or buy
Yeah.
someone else's taxes and you can
Right.
buy it. I was like, okay, but there's a lot of fine print
Yeah.
we need to read. Hold on.
Yeah.
But I think if, again, going back to someone who's local, someone who's done a lot of transactions, and they're comfortable having difficult conversations, because let's face it, in real estate, there's a lot of difficult conversations that we have to have.
Right.
And I think that if you're comfortable being, what is it? Yeah, if you're comfortable being uncomfortable having those conversations, but that's what you need. You need an agent that's gonna sometimes lay it out there and like, listen, guys, here are your options.
Right. This is what
A,
it is. Yeah.
B, or C. What do you want to do?
Right.
You know, me personally, I would not do A and B, but what do you guys want to do?
Yeah.
Because at
Well-
the end of the day, it's for them.
And if I were putting myself in a buyer's shoes, if you're looking at a home, if it's a for sale by owner, that's a little different ballgame. You can talk to the owner, work up a deal at the title office. You don't have to have a real estate agent do a transaction. But if you are going to open houses and you're afraid to have a buyer's agent, you're going to be dealing with a seller's agent, and they represent the seller, and they can represent you too. But just think about that.
Yeah.
I, as a buyer, would want my own representative.
Yeah. You don't want someone half representing you.
No. Now, if you're buying your mom's house or your friend's house, fine, whatever. But if you are going to a new area or even a house, you need someone in your corner. And, it works out best for the buyer to have representation.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Have we covered all the bases?
I think so.
Oh, do we want to talk about the stats? Because I know you mentioned the
Go
stats.
for
but
it,
I don't
yeah.
think we actually said the stats. So the stats.
You take
were-
this one away. You know the stats.
The stats were in 2025. So 2024,
Yep.
74% of realtors did 0 transactions. So, that's a lot of us.
That is.
And then the amount that did 11 to 20 transactions was 20% of realtors. And then the rest that did 20 and up was the rest of the percentage.
Yeah, with the 4%.
Yeah, was the rest. So that is crazy, and that
Yeah.
just goes to show you go with someone who you like, you trust,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
And the power of referral. And if you don't, pick an agent that's going to show their value to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you go to an open house and you have an agent that's not going to even try to talk to you or, not give you anything, hey, this is what's going on in the location, trying to help you, because it's all about helping and educating and just being of value
Yeah.
first, and you guys see that.
Is that a fair question for a buyer to ask a real estate agent when they're talking to them? How many transactions did you do last year?
I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because
there's some point where the number can be so high, you're going to wonder, am I going to deal with you or your assistant?
It's a good point.
Or one of your closing agents. And there are big teams that have a name on them, but you never deal with the person who has that name. And that's fine, because you deal with the showing agent or a closing agent, and they're great. But you can learn a lot by the number of transactions. You did 1, you did none, you did 75. It just depends
Right.
on kind of what you're
What you're
looking for.
Yeah,
Person who maybe did 10, you're probably going to 10 to 20, maybe 10 to 40. You're probably going to deal with them directly a lot more hands-on. You get to the big numbers, you might still get the exact same care, and probably you'll be taken care of just as well, but you might not be dealing with the person that you built the relationship with.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that question just sort of lends into how experienced the realtor is.
Yes.
Because if you ask that question, they say, oh, I did 2 transactions last year. They might not be as experienced as somebody who did 20 or 30 transactions last year.
Right.
And, throughout this conversation that we've had today, we've certainly talked about the importance of having a realtor that's experienced and active in their markets.
Right.
So I just thought that would be might be a good question to ask.
Yeah, they
as
can
far
always-
as to sort of uncover that experience.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I know some agents that only do 5, but they're way up there, bigger land lots.
Yes.
100-acre lots or 200-acre lots, and you're like, okay, well, that make
Those are harder to sell.
those are harder
Yeah,
to sell.
yeah.
So just have that in the back of your mind. So I guess it depends. So if you're only talking residential only, that's different versus, because I do a lot of land. So that's why I'm like, well, the land ones take longer. So
Yeah.
just because, like I said, some of those farm and ranch ones is gotta
Yeah.
definitely do your due diligence with those.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right.
Yeah.
We cover everything today?
I think so.
Yeah.
Is that episode 1?
Episode 1 is in the books now.
It's a wrap.
Oh, we didn't say if you're looking for a realtor in DFW,
Oh, yeah.
we're here.
Yes.
You've got Texas Tammy and Chance Gibbs.
Yes,
Yeah.
just holler at
So
us.
Yeah.
absolutely,
Give us a call.
We can definitely put y'all's contact information.
Yeah.
In the
If we don't know, we'll find out.
Yep.
Yes. Yes.
And we'll definitely see you guys on the next episode too. So
Yeah.
we're excited.
Awesome.
Me too.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining. Appreciate it. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye, y'all.